Hey everybody, it's your boy Wayne here to get you guys an options premium update. It's been a little bit, so let's go ahead and get you caught up on all of the good things that have transpired this year. We'll go back to the original goal that I had going into 2024, and that was to sell far more cash secured puts than covered calls. And the reason being is I've begun to struggle, if you will, with allowing my shares to be called away. I think about Meta, I think about Apple, I think about Tesla. And when you sell covered calls against positions that you also want to hold in the long term, yeah, those two ideas don't exactly align. So the goal that I had was to sell more cash secured puts. That's certainly the case. Take a look here, 617 total contracts. We have about a week left in the year if we compare that to 236 covered call contracts. Now, it's difficult to say that I don't want to sell any covered calls because if you're running the wheel strategy, then at some point you're going to be assigned on that cash secured put. And then, of course, the best thing for you to do at that point is to turn around and sell covered calls against that position that you were assigned. And truth be told, I do own positions within my portfolio that I actually like to sell covered calls against. I think Starbucks is really the perfect example. I've been able to hold on to my shares, but at the same time, generate very meaningful premium. So let's go ahead and get you an update because I think about 9 months ago, I was so excited to share with all of you that I crossed $100,000 in total options net premium. Seeing how 9 months has gone by, let's get you an update on that total number. And looking at this spreadsheet, I promise you, you can't look at these numbers and draw a firm conclusion. One of the things that I've been doing since begin selling contracts in 2022 was tracking the total amount of money that I made year over year. So if we look at 2022, I made $47,000. Then we get to 2023 and I was negative 75,000. Well, that's not quite the case. The reason you're seeing the negative 75K for 2023 is, again, going back to positions that I opened in 2023 that were set to close in 2024. But when you roll a position, whether it's a covered call or a cash secured put, there's going to be two legs to that process. And typically the first leg involves buying to close at a loss. So I've obviously rolled quite a bit from the contracts that I had opened in 2023. So again, you can't look at this number here and say, oh my goodness, he made 134,000 in covered calls. That's not quite the entire story. So we're going to get you the actual firm number. Remember, the last time I checked in with you, I was excited to share that I crossed 100,000, and if I'm not mistaken, that was around March of this year. So before I give you that total number, let's go ahead and look at the top 3 stock tickers that I was able to sell successfully on a regular basis, cash secured puts. And we'll go ahead and start with the number 3 position, and that's going to be Coinbase. Now, Coinbase is a position that I don't necessarily want to own 100 shares of, but I've got no problem selling puts against it. I've got no problem if I were to be assigned. The stock has been very volatile this year for obvious reasons. And you can see in this year, I have sold a total of 45 contracts and I've made $6,653. Now, I want to scroll to the very top of this spreadsheet, and you're going to see here, not once, if you look at the column M that shows the outcome, not once was it ever assigned. And for the most part, I've been able to close out early. That's been my strategy, right? If you sell to open and you make it $100, I think a lot of people would like to close out, right? Where they buy to close for no more than $10 or $15, right? Where they're locking in anywhere from 85 to, let's say, 90% profit. I'm much more different. With a volatile stock like Coin, I have no problem buying to close and only locking in, let's say, 50 to 70%. So I think that's been the real secret to my success this year, because I'm going to call it that. This year, when it comes to selling options, was definitely very successful. So Coinbase, the number 3 stock in which I made $6,655. Let's go ahead and get you now the update on the number 2 stock. And it shouldn't be a surprise. It's NVIDIA. And you can see here, I actually have 3 contracts that are actively open. And I am very, very close to crossing $10,000 in total options premium. Now, it's also worth noting that between my brokerages, my wife and I, we're both selling options from our portfolios. But again, I want to go back to the very first contract. Something this year that I took advantage of, and I think you probably did as well, was when Nvidia did the split. And so that's what's really nice. If you take a look here at the collateral that I had to have in the early part of the year, for example, this contract, $85,000 I had to have for collateral. And now we scroll down to the very bottom, post split. And of course, you're not making as much premium when I was having to obviously have a collateral of 80,000 plus. But as the stock continues to hover, I'd say between 120 and 140, I've been able to make some pretty genuine premium. And I always go back to what I mentioned earlier, even with Coinbase, not once across any of these contracts have I ever been assigned. And in fact, the total amount of contracts that I sold in 2024 was 73 against Nvidia. Now, here's a reasonable argument, or at least a comment that I can certainly anticipate in the comments. Wayne, you could have just bought Nvidia and you would have made just as much money. Well, I don't quite agree with that, because the problem with owning the stock is there's hindsight when and if anybody makes that comment today. It's assuming that I would buy Nvidia and I would sell to get that realized gain. Here's the coolest thing about Nvidia. I've never owned even one share of Nvidia, yet I'm about to make $10,000 this year selling options against it. And I'm going to continue to sell options against Nvidia going into the next year. So let me know in the comments, do you guys agree with that thought process? Would you rather just own Nvidia outright, or have you guys been riding this premium wave, selling some options against Nvidia and sort of realizing the gain that way? But there you have the number 2 stock that I've been able to be very successful. And let's get into the number 1 position, and that's going to be Meta. And again, Meta doesn't really beat Nvidia by that much. Now, Meta offers a bit of a challenge, and you'll see I don't have any open contracts. And the last time I had an open contract, the collateral that I had to have was about $58,000. Meta has since gone even above the 600 per share mark. That's extremely difficult when I'm trying to diversify the total number of contracts that I have open at any given time. I'm not made of money. I've got a fair amount of cash in my brokerage, but I have to be careful, because if I were to be assigned, let's say 100 shares of Meta, it would definitely put a squeeze on me with being able to sell other puts against other fantastic stock tickers. But again, I go back to why I love Meta. Now, Meta is an interesting one because I actually do own 100 shares of Meta. So I'm actually selling covered calls against Meta as well, regretfully so, because I do think with Meta's gone to the moon, if you will. It's very likely in the forthcoming year, I could have those 100 shares of Meta called away from me, and it certainly won't be for the value that it's currently at. So take a look here. Meta is going to be the 4th highest position here in my portfolio, and you'll see my total return on those 100 shares, in which my average cost is $242. Right now, Meta is just under $600. That's about a $35,000, again, unrealized gain. So this is the interesting thing about, again, owning 100 shares. And you say, well, I've got $35,000 in unrealized return. Yeah, but it's just that, right? It's unrealized. And then, of course, I go back to look at the success I've had with selling all of these puts against Meta. 64 contracts for the entirety of this year. I've made over $10,000. And again, it's worth pointing out. Listen, I don't have a crystal ball. Of course, Meta can do things where I would obviously maybe be too aggressive with my strike price, and that stock that trade could have gone against me. But I think what's worked for me this year is to not be greedy, to diversify, right? I'm not selling, if you will, 5 contracts against Meta. No, I sell 1 contract against Meta on a weekly basis. And if I can lock in, we'll say 50 to 80% profit, it just kind of depends on what my other contract's doing. That is certainly the case. And it's been very successful for me because, again, those 64 contracts, I have not once yet been assigned. So those are the top 3. We've got Meta in the number 1 spot, Nvidia in the number 2, Coinbase in the number 3, And then let's give an honorable mention to stock ticker MSTR. That is one that I know a lot of you have probably been researching, looking into. I have begun to dabble and sell what I think are conservative puts against it. And then Tesla has also been very good for me. But those 5 stock tickers are not the only ones that I'm selling puts. And you can see if we go here to the total amount of contracts, here's the total amount when it comes to those 617 contracts, $66,862. But remember, you just can't look at that number because I've also sold covered calls. So let's go ahead and scroll down and get you guys a total number for the year. Now, 2022 and 2023, this is the total amount of premium that I've earned. It's important to note that premium is the net premium amount. And what that means is I'm not just showing you all of my profitable contracts. That $90,942 includes contracts in which I took a loss on as well. So if you look at 2024, this is a combination of covered calls and cash secured puts. I've made $82,625, which means from the time that I began selling options, going back to 2022 when I was tuned into Brad Finn, who I always and continue to give credit for teaching me everything that I know when it comes to selling covered calls and cash secured puts, my total premium is $173,000. But the important number for me this year is this right here, right? That $82,000, because quite honestly, that was a big test for me, right? Could I make more than I made last year, and could I do so by focusing more on cash secured puts? Hey guys, I know it's been a minute, but I hope you enjoy this catch up, if you will, on everything related to premium and puts and calls and all that good stuff. And we'll see. Maybe the momentum will continue and I'll push out some more videos. But in the meantime, I hope you guys are doing well. We'll see you on the next one.